What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and today I'm here to talk about Warhammer 40K. In this one, I will be going over an excerpt from the novel The World Engine that one of you guys recommended for me to read. It is a battle between the Space Marines of the Astral Knights going up against the Necrons and their super weapon that is basically the Death Star, but in 40K. It is an ancient Necron construct that can literally obliterate planets to mere dust. And in this battle, we see the epicness that is the Catan. Now, the Catan are these ancient star gods that were literally eating up energy for millennia, and the gods made a pact with the Necron tier, and that is how they got their bodies and why they look like the Catan look like nowadays. Because like the Deceiver, the Nightbringer, they didn't always look like that. They got these forms through their necrodermis bodies, but that's a little bit of a different tangent. Today we're looking at this awesome battle between the Imperium, the Space Marines, and the Necrons, a Catan. So without further ado, let's dive right in. In the center of the debris cloud rose a burning ember, a mote of fire ascending from the darkness. It gathered matter and light onto itself, like a black hole pulling at the surface of Borses. Hayauhi let the image of it burn into his brain, sinking in deep, because this would have to be remembered. The being that formed in the center of the zone of destruction hovered above the tallest spire, and its body was composed of darkness. It had no fixed shape. Its only definite feature was the crescent of 3 eyes that burned in its heart. Tendrils of it, composed of torn and compacted metal, dragged it along above the spires. Hayauhi did not have to picture the geography of Borses to know where it was headed. What followed had to be remembered as well. Hayauhi turned his consciousness, this time outside his body, riding the ripples growing in the warp from the impact of the being erupting from its prison. He could see Borses unfolding beneath him, the endless steel canyons and metal spires rushing past. The Astral Knights had fought across much of the planet's surface, but now he saw, from his high psychic vantage point, great palaces and monuments that the Astral Knights had not seen. It was the work of endless millennia, the labor of countless scarabs and worker constructs, devoted to deifying their nobles. The entity roared up ahead, shredding the spire tops as it passed and absorbed the fragments of matter that flew up into its swirling mass. Limbs formed and reformed as it hauled itself along. Pulses of raw alien hatred battered against the surface of Hayauhi's mind. It was not human emotion, but there was nothing human about this being. It was unmistakably hatred. The entity crossed the labyrinth wastes. It paused over columns of warrior constructs, arriving to join the final stages of the battle, and those that could feel dismay felt it now as the great darkness bellowed and stormed overhead. Smoke and flames licked up from the cathedral of the 7 moons. Parts of it were ablaze. A force of Astral Knights had made it inside and destroyed one of the defense gun batteries, blowing up the power coils and sending gauze fire flooding through the cathedral. But the damage, while appalling, had been barely noticeable against the scale of the very building itself. Outside the gates, hundreds of Astral Knights lay dead. They had engaged the bulk of Hayauhi's defenders in open battle, shattering great phalanxes of warrior constructs and bringing down dozens of Triarch stalkers. There the bodies lay thickest, among them the banner of the 9th Company that lay across the charred body of Captain Kaibar and his command squad. The final Astral Knights alive in the battle for the Cathedral of the 7 Moons were fighting inside the main gates, where they had forced their way in. The Guardians of the Temple had pursued them, and even as darkness passed over the ruination of the battlefield, the Astral Knights were firing off the last of their bolter shells. They fought back to back in the forest of statues and shrines dedicated to the ancient Necron tier, their blood spattered across the faces of past overlords from a dozen Necron dynasties. The Temple Guardians closed the last few steps and laid into them with their halberds, power fields shredding through armor. The battle for the Cathedral of the Seven Moons was over. Silver and gold glittered as Overlord Hekaroth and his Lich-Guard retinue arrived on the battlements. The darkness bore over them as the moon that had passed closest to it was torn apart and absorbed into its body. Hekaroth took one look at the approaching entity, and the silvery necrodermis swarmed over his body in a protective shroud. An arm of compacted debris swept the Lich-Guard off the wall. They tumbled down the side of the cathedral, along with tons of shattered battlements. The darkness loomed closer, and the necrodermis squirmed off of Hekaroth's body as of its own accord, drawn off in ductile streamers into the swirling blackness. The entity wove the necrodermis around it in the form of the star god the Necrons had first besieged, then worshipped, then destroyed. Even this single shard of it was terrifying to see taking shape. It was like a deity of destruction and calamity from some long-forgotten human religion, crowned with 3 burning eyes, its enormous form clad in liquid metal. Heyaohi did not know the Necron language, in which Hekaroth spoke to Yagrana, the World Maker, the Catan imprisoned in the heart of the Borses, to power it and guide it towards Mars. It was not a tongue that even needed sound, transmitted in pure information, but Heyaohi could guess it involved pleading, perhaps bargaining, for Hekaroth offered lordship to Borses and every Necron under his command, everything he could possibly give in return for being permitted to simply continue existing. And Heyaohi knew the reply too. "You betrayed us," Yagranya would be saying. "You imprisoned us. You enslaved us to this mad plan to journey to Mars." Hekaroth held the tesseract in which he had imprisoned and then recaptured Turakanin, no doubt in trying to persuade the Catan that its enslavement had been that of Turakanin's doing. Yagranya snatched the tesseract and dissolved it in its hand, consumed by a purple-black fire, and with it the last glimmer of Turakin's existence. But this was not enough. "You, all that came before, you are all the same." Heyaohi could almost hear the star god's words, and their meaning could not be in doubt. "The whole Necron race is our enemy. Now I am free, and you will be punished." This gave Heyaohi some measure of satisfaction to see this overlord lifted off the battlements and dissected, piece by piece, by the will of this Catan. Each section peeled and lifted away, gradually reducing the overlord to a spindly metal skeleton that squirmed in pain. If Necrons could feel it, then they sure felt that pain. But that too was dissolved away until only a glimmering speck of consciousness sat in this Catan's palm. The Catan then closed its fists, and Hekaroth was annihilated. Yagranya raised its arms as if making a sacred pronouncement. The substance of the Cathedral of the Seven Moons came apart and reformed above it, an endless torrent of shattered metal forming great rings that orbited the star god. They became gigantic blades that the Catan stabbed into the surface of Borses, driving them deep down into the crust of the world it had once built in an earlier age of the galaxy. The planet was ripping apart, dissolving everything in front of it like a blowtorch. It tore through the vast power sources that drove Borses, through the chamber where warrior constructs were assembled and repaired, through the necropoli of long-forgotten dynasties, and the vaults full of war machines and spacecraft. The sky changed from a dark gray mantle of clouds to a patchwork of light and dark as the cover was blown away. He knew what this meant. With the destruction of the generators and reactors, the shielding around the planet was failing. Where once before Borses had been impervious to the torpedoes and lance batteries, now its surface was laid naked and open. He realized he had been holding his breath, for now he breathed it out in relief. The lightning rail continued to function until it reached the site of the Tempestus's wreck. The great scar in the cityscape still burned. The bodies of the astral knights, thrown clear in the impact, still lay among the rubble as he picked his way carefully through the destruction towards the aft portion of the ship. He felt the ground shudder beneath his feet as Yagrania completed its murder of Borses, and he hoped he still had time. And with that being said, this is where I will end the reading from this awesome showcase of power of a Catan. Even without form, a Catan is still capable of destroying a planet. The form only gives it a shell to which it can move and interact with the physical realm even better. So yeah, this was a pretty powerful showcase of what Catan can do. We all know how strong Space Marines are, and most Necron overlords and lords are on a different level, capable of phasing through attacks, capable of regeneration, and capable of using technology and weapons that deatomize things. And to see one of these warriors being reduced to nothing at the hands of a Catan really showcases that these guys are literal gods made manifest. And that's only with one shard, one fragment of a Catan. Imagine what these fully whole Catan were capable eons past. But yeah, that's all I got for today, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below. And of course, I greatly recommend you guys check out the entirety of this book, The World Engine. But yeah, that's all I got for today. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening. And as always, it's been the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.